Hello and welcome to our TF Together session with Alessio Assonitis, the director of the Medici Archive Project. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. It's wonderful to hear about what the Medici Archive Project does. And also we're going to be discussing your upcoming webinar series, the Tuesday 10 Talks, which is wonderfully self-explanatory. And but perhaps first then we could begin with a discussion perhaps about your work and what the Medici Archive Project does.
Thank you for having me. I am an artist. I'm from Rome, and I originally majored in classics. Then I realized that classics doesn't really bring you very far, in terms of getting a job. And I decided to do art history, which I thought probably was better, but and I came to the Medici Archive Project as a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellows back in 2004. And then I became director around 2010. In a sense, this is, after my PhD at Columbia, this is the only job that I actually had in many ways. I taught a little bit, in between, but nothing great. And the reason why I sort of, decided, to do this, both as a scholar at the beginning and also as a director, is because I always liked working in archives. I mean, it's something I always liked to do since the very beginning, since the earliest, since either archives or historical libraries in Rome mostly. My PhD was mostly researched at the Vatican archives, and the Vatican library. So that's where I did most of my training. And then I worked. My dissertation was on Savonarola. So I mean, it was close in a sense and related, of course, to the Medici, but not these Medici, because the Medici Archive Project specifically focuses on the Medici Grand Dukes. So from Cosimo I, 1537, all the way to Gian Gastone and Anna Maria Luisa. She's not a Grand Duchess, so 1537 to 1743. The Medici Archive Project has had for many years one goal, and still continues to have one goal, that is to promote and valorize the archive of the Medici. And the archive of the Granducal Medici comprises something like 5 to 6 million letters. It's a vast archive, about half of shelf space at the Archivio di Stato in Florence. And the way it does this is by putting material online. So we began to, before everyone started sort of, espousing the digital cause because of COVID, we have been doing this for almost 20 years. Originally we had a simple website that showed, transcriptions of documents. Eventually, this became something more of having transcriptions of Renaissance documents, of early modern documents, as well as the image of the document itself, so people can sort of check the transcription with the original. Now, and that was a platform which is called BIA, B-I-A, which is available online right now and free. Now we actually have launched a new platform called MIA, which is slightly different insofar as people not only transcribe documents or are able to access them online, but also are uploading the documents that they usually image when they go to the Archivio di Stato. A lot of scholars now, given the restrictions, but also before, just go to the Archivio just really to take pictures. It used to be that you go to the Archivio, to the archive in Florence, which is Piazza Beccaria, to do research. Now, since 2016, 17, since pictures are allowed, people go take a lot of pictures, a lot of photographs, and then go home and study them. Sometimes, they take they image a whole volume, maybe 400, 500 folios, but they only need one letter, so they're stuck with 399 pages of documentary material which they don't know what to do with, and this is an opportunity for them to share it with everybody else. So this platform, MIA, allows you to share, upload, share, discuss, edit, teach, and even publish discoveries once they are, of course, discovered.
Okay, wow, it seems extensive. And is this largely academic use then, or exclusively academic use, or who tends to consult this database?
It's interesting because it is obviously meant for academics. I mean, you're obviously dealing with primary sources. And bear in mind that, yes, there are transcriptions, but the majority of material which is on the websites, on the platforms, is digital documents. So you have to know how to read this material. I mean, and not everyone is able to read, Italian 16th century script. But at the same time, there are a lot of different kinds of scholars and, of different walks of academic life. I have a lot of high school students, sort of accessing and looking at this stuff. Obviously, they're looking more at the transcriptions and the synopses. They're doing a paper and they want to know something about, a specific, historical individual, and they are able to sort of, it's very easy. It's very easy. I mean, there's nothing complicated about it. Also, one thing that people don't understand is that the Medici Archive is a global archive. That is, for every letter that the Medici sent to the world, about 30 or 40 came to Florence. And the majority of these letters that came to Florence are from ambassadors in London, Paris, Istanbul, Krakow, Aleppo. I mean, everywhere, all over Europe, and even from the New World. So it's interesting. There's a lot more information about the Great Fire of London, for instance, than about the construction of the Duomo, in these archives, or the later construction or the decoration. There's a lot more information about Baroque Rome than about what is happening in Florence. Those are other archives that one should consult, and not this one specifically. Just one thing, the new platform will not only include the letters, the 5 or 6 million letters, but also all the inventories, all the blueprints, all the different kinds of ancillary material from the entire Medici world. So originally, it was the first website, first platform called Via, like the daughter of Cosimo, Via de' Medici, only included the letters. So it's about, again, 5 to 6 million. With this new platform, scholars are able to upload up to anything in between 10 and 15 million letters. So it's a vast community source project.
It sounds like an absolutely incredible resource, and certainly seems extensive in all its outreach. And what is interesting then to me is how you've taken this academic archive and are now aiming to bring that to a broader audience with your webinar series, which is the 10 Talks. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about something like that, and I'll put up the program on the screen. Okay.
Yes, I mean, before I talk about the 10 Talks, which will take place Tuesday for the next, really for the next 6 or 7 months, there is an underlying mission that is sort of behind the 10 Talks, which is the mission of the Medici Archive Project, that is basically to make this material available. Now, we have different kinds of programs. We have a program on women artists, a program on Jewish history, a program on music history, and one on the history of medicine. I mean, the goal is to take the document, the written word, the written document, and make sure that this is somehow manifests itself into something more tangible. So, for instance, we've been working we discovered all the documents about the Jewish ghetto. The Jewish ghetto used to be in Piazza della Repubblica. It no longer is. It was destroyed and demolished in the end of the 19th century. So we basically found all the blueprints, all the people who lived there, all the professional occupations, so on and so forth. And yes, it's important to study as scholars, but it's also important to make sure that this material becomes available in different ways. So we have constructed, for instance, a 3D reconstruction of the ghetto. We're probably going to do an exhibition on the ghetto in Florence. And same thing with the women artists, from the document all the way to the exhibition. More interesting is the music. We are now having scholars look at ancient, look at manuscripts, with music, specifically looking at masses and motets that have never been performed, or only performed once. Well, yes, it's important to make sure that everyone knows that these exist, but it's also very important to perform them.
Yes.
So we're actually we're taking the written word all the way to its ultimate manifestation, whether it's an exhibition, a book, of course, but also a performance. So the Tuesday 10 Talks are come out of this mission, the idea, of taking material which can be hard, can be not easily accessible, and make it available, but not dumbing it down. That's not what we want to do. We want to make it available, we want to make it engaging. So, for instance, the first talk, which is tomorrow, which I'm giving, is basically showing, the life of Grand Duke Cosimo in 10 documents. But at the same time, I selected 10 different kinds of documents. So I'll explain what is, what a baptismal record is, what an inventory is, explaining his life through different typologies. And these are typologies, by the way, that we still use today. We still make inventories. We still write letters, emails. We still, have, birth records. So it's important that, that this is that somehow we are able to make them engaging, because they are engaging.
Yes.
One of the things I thought about, I as I told you before our talk started, I didn't really watch the Medici TV show, but at some point, at some level, we were asked to collaborate by some producer. I can't remember how it started. It was a long time ago, and I had a feeling that they were making things up, that making the plot more interesting, more complicated, and I told them the actual original documents are a lot more interesting than than anything that Hollywood can ever invent. So a lot more interesting, there's a lot more bloodshed, a lot more intrigue, a lot more intellect. These are not, after all, it is a Renaissance. It's not, we're not talking about some period of brutal, events. It is a most flourishing moment. But these documents are much more interesting. They're a lot more interesting. For instance, one thing I usually say when we walk around Florence, or we go to the Uffizi, we see the buildings that the Medici constructed, or other families constructed, or the paintings they patronized and commissioned. What the documents show you is the mechanisms behind the buildings, the paintings, the institution. Think about a watch. The painting is the facade of the watch. The archive is the mechanism that make that facade look good and work.
Excellent. Yes. Okay. That's wonderful. That certainly sounds like an exciting series, and quite varied too in terms of scope. It does seem like you're covering various, aspects we wouldn't have considered before, seem available before. So certainly something to be worth tuning into. Perhaps I could ask a more personal question then, is what brought you to be so fascinated with the Medici? And we'll start there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. Obviously, as an art historian, one has a privileged way of entry. You look at the paintings, you want to know more about them, So, and there are different ways of approaching our history, simple connoisseurship or much more theoretical approaches. I always like the historical approach. I always like the, looking at again, the mechanisms that make these events, these pictures, these sculptures, these piazzas happen, and that's how, so getting into, the sort of the microhistory was a lot more interesting, and making that microhistory come together, working in archives, so that we can sort of get rid of an urban legend, is not finding the document, the document that changes history. Working in archives, meaning it's getting many documents and making up an argument in favor of a certain event, of a certain painting, of a certain work of art, or whatever. It's like a mosaic. You take the tessera and you put them all together and you make the mosaic. Many people think, the question I always get is, what incredible document did you find? What sort of, and well, there can be, but it's nothing, there's no, for instance, Luther writing to Leo X saying, I got it all wrong, I made it up, there's nothing like that, there will never be anything like that. So it's much more of working, piecing things together, almost like a case in a trial, you have to come up with an argument. And that's the fun part. Of course, there's a tactile experience. Having the volume in front of you still is a kind of archaeology. You open a volume you've never seen before, just the idea of looking through. And one of the things that I tell a lot of people who come to the Medici Archive Project, we have fellowships for undergraduates, and we have interns, we have postdoctoral fellowships, is not so much, finding what you need, but finding too much, and being able to, to distill that in ways which can serve your dissertation, serve your article. because I know a lot of people at the Archive di Stato who've been there for many, many years, and they just continue looking and looking and looking, and I mean, and it never ends, and at a certain point you gotta say enough,
Yes.
right? And usually when the funding ends, it's enough.
Yes.
But in general, I mean, you have to sort of, and it's because the information is, I mean, the Archivio di Stato as an entity, as an institution, has over 80 or 90 miles of shelf space of, medieval to early modern, documentary material. And that's one of 120 circa Archivi di Stato in Italy. And it's, and there are about 8,000 communal archives, and there are about, God knows how many ecclesiastical and private archives. So the breadth of material is, is immense.
Yes, absolutely. And then another question I wanted to ask you is, why do you think the Medici garner such attention in pop culture? Also, we refer briefly to the TV series, but you did answer that about the bloodshed and the excitement there, and Hollywood couldn't come up with better. But is there anything else, do you think? Why are the Medici so stand out in Italian history, I suppose, as well?
There's a idea that came from a scholar who wrote a book called Rinascimento without the article Rinascimento, and he basically claimed that I'm summarizing it. The period of the Medici, they had a nostalgia for the future as opposed to nostalgia for the past. Because we always like to think of the Renaissance as looking back at the classical period with a sense of nostalgia, wanting to, in a sense, resurrect that or interpret that in many ways. Well, the Medici, I think, had a nostalgia for the future, meaning that they wanted to be. What was important was then and there. It wasn't the past. Yes, it was the glorification of the past, but it was also a sense of the present and the future. So the nostalgia of something that was about to happen. And I always found it very interesting. That sort of attracted me to the Medici, the idea that that it's the present and the future, the one you're really excited about and you're really longing for, not so much the past. And that is, I think, that's what I think at the end what attracted me the most about the Medici in general and the culture around the Medici, because the Medici is one family, of course. There are many other families in the 15th and 16th century. So this idea I mean, another thing which I find so interesting, if you look at the Medici archive, there are about maybe 250,000 early newspapers. They're anonymous newspapers, right? And as we know, the Medici didn't have much of a colonial ambition. I mean, the most they reached was Siena. That was the apex of their colonialism. But they were interested in knowing about the world. They were interested to know about what was going on around them. And without acting upon it, without being like the Spanish or the English or the Dutch or the French, there's a sense of sort of, taking over. The idea of that knowledge was all that you needed. Bear in mind that Florence was a very small state, compared to these great nations, but definitely a state that had all the ability and the capability of taking over, new land, and it didn't. But they liked the idea of knowing about them. So if you go to Palazzo Vecchio, the Guardaroba, you have all the maps. You have objects from all over the world. You have news from all over the world. And they, in a sense, adore that, love that. It is almost like a 3D reconstruction, the maps, the objects, the news, in a sense. And I always thought that was very fascinating. That, the knowledge was enough, and in ways not to spoil whatever you're looking, but the news of it. Of course, once you have the news about a faraway place, it is somehow spoiled because someone is there reporting about it. Not always in great ways, of course, and as we've discovered, as we always know, actually. So I thought that this was something that attracted me the most, about the Medici in general. Of course, then what the rest is the art, the city, and and all the things that we like, as lovers of the city is the reason why I like them. There's no difference.
Do you have a favorite trace of the Medici in Florence, or an art piece, or an artifact, or some site that when people say, where can I find the best of the Medici in Florence, where do you send them?
I still think that the villa at Poggio a Caiano, unfortunately, was sort of, I wouldn't say destroyed, that's too big, but it was sort of meddled with by the Savoia, our kings, but Poggio a Caiano remains a very. I mean, I still sort of breathe, the air of first Lorenzo and then Cosimo and the other Grand Dukes who stayed there and lived there. It still has, it's not in Florence. It's outside of Florence. It's near, it's in Poggio a Caiano, and I think that remains, to me at least, not just the frescoes in general, but sort of that the spirit is still there in many ways. Just approaching it, it's still there. I think that there's a lot more Medici in the villas than in the cities. If you know what I mean.
Yes.
So there's a lot more of that. I was there. I was recently at Villa Castello, and I thought the same. The same feeling again. That there's much more there. There's much more of that intimacy that you see. Not all of them, but some of them.
Okay, so it's the Medici villas that you would advise.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, good to know, and not the first place perhaps people go to experience.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I want. I mean, of course, Palazzo Medici, Palazzo Pitti.
Yes, go see
but
them all.
This is a much more oblique way of looking at the Medici. And of course, I think the greatest monument they left is their archive. I mean, it's a monument in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's certainly ample matter there to learn about Medici, so it's wonderful for anyone who's tuning in and is interested in learning more about them. And
in fact, sorry, the 10 talks are exactly that. They're about the archive. They're somehow, it's in a sense, our homage to the archive, but also a way to showing a larger audience that, number one, archives are not this place where people go there to die in the dust. They're a much more dynamic place. But also because the stories are very interesting, and and the way we make these stories available through our platforms one just can go on a platform and read about, you can punch in tomato and you get, how many times the tomato plant was in the Medici villas or the Medici palaces, how many, it's that, thing that makes it very interesting. It's the stories behind it,
And am I right in saying there's a membership required to consult this database? Just to
you have to sign up.
Okay,
and you have to register because there are fora, so people discuss things, and we don't want someone who just wants to sell, God knows what, So we have to, of course, have a username. But as soon as your username and password, you're free to do anything you want.
Okay, so that's great for anyone who wants to consult this then to know. And what about anyone who wanted to get involved then? Is there a way to do more with the Medici Archive Project?
Yes. There are many ways of doing it. Of course, we are a research institute, so of course our main focus is, scholars. Whether they're postdoctoral or doctoral scholars. So, we have fellowships for both. We have lots of internships. We have lots of people coming from all over the world, doing, staying with us for a period of time, because it is a hybrid organization. We deal with, with documents, but we also deal with digital humanities. We not now or recently, but we have, every year we have an average of 5 to 6 conferences or workshops. Each year we've been organizing an exhibition. We did the first one was on the Lanzi at Uffizi in 2019, and this year was the exhibition on Giovanna Garzoni, which Sheila Barker curated. And we're working on an exhibition on, as I said, on the Jewish ghetto in Florence, and another one on the perception of Africa, of the Medici, so the Medici perception of Africa, through the objects in their collections. So we're doing lots of, different. So there's plenty of. If you want to work in the more digital, technological sort of area, we have lots of people coming. But in general, and then of course we have, if you go on our website, where it says "Become a Friend," there's you have many choices, and also talk with Sheila Barker about how you can be involved. Of course you can be involved, if you live in, we have a partnership with a sort of a Medici affiliate, which is basically our Medici Archive Project in Shanghai. If you're in Shanghai, you can do Medici stuff over there. If you're in America, whether Washington, Philadelphia, New York, there's plenty of stuff to do. It's the way we're a nonprofit. So there's a mission. We believe, I think, that making primary sources available to the world, factual truths, not truth, it's factual truth.
Yes.
Makes this place a better place. It's otherwise it's all Wikipedia and Facebook. That's where you get information.
No, and to seek out information as opposed to having it slapped in your face with no thought behind it. I think there's certainly that art needs to be cultivated and encouraged that people
and
do.
questioned.
Absolutely.
Documents are there to question things, to create dissent when dissent is necessary. I mean, one thing, thanks to Sheila Barker, we would never have known of all the women artists that were painting and working during this period if it weren't for the documents. Same thing with the Jewish ghetto. We didn't even know how it looked like until we found all the blueprints, all the apartments, everything, even the decoration inside. And that's exactly, what do we do? I mean, otherwise we're just on the surface of things. Archives allow you to scratch as much as possible that surface.
And thank you so much for joining us, Alessio. It's been absolutely illuminating to hear that you do so much and that there is so much available there for anyone who's curious, and equally anyone who has an academic objective. This is where your answers are, and it's wonderful to share the news about that. And equally anyone who is simply interested to learning more, the webinar series certainly sounds a great place to start. So thank you so much for joining us, and also everyone who's tuned in. Our next talk will take place on October 2nd, and will be a discussion with Carol Vale, the director of the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice, with art historian Paula Wojnowicz. So that'll be another opportunity to learn more about the art world from a different perspective. So thank you so much again, Alessio.
Thank you.
Was fascinating to learn so much about your work. Thank you.
Thank you again. Ciao.